What we're saying is for 3 and 4-year-olds where both parents are working, there will be 30 hours of free childcare. That's a doubling from the current 15 hours of free childcare. That will be a huge benefit to families, help people with the cost of childcare, help them get on and get into work.
All right. Liz Truss, thank you very much for the interview and for explaining that bit of the breaking policy. We're joined now by Danny Alexander, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, interviewing him, I think, for the second time in 4 days.
I'll come in again in 4 days' time, Andrew, if you like.
That's what I'm worried about. Do you support the Conservative policy of giving housing association tenants a chance to buy their own home?
I don't think it's the right priority in housing at the moment, to be honest. I think that there are real doubts which your questioning exposed about the extent to which this actually is an affordable measure. But also, I'd say that I completely support the aspiration of home ownership. But that should be available to a much wider group of people.
Sure, but
that's why tomorrow in our manifesto we'll be putting forward an idea called Rent to Own, which is about people who are renting houses. People who are renting houses being able to build up a share in their house so that eventually they own it.
Eventually. But what's wrong now? Now, people do want to own their own homes. And it's become more difficult than ever to do so. Partly because we've not built enough houses. This government hasn't built enough. The previous Labour government didn't build enough. So why not those who are renting? There's 1.3 million families. At the moment, most of them probably have no chance of owning their own property for the foreseeable future. What is wrong with putting these people on the property ladder?
But in a sense, the answer to your question is within the question that you've asked, because the big issue as a country is that we have to be building the overall number of homes, I think about 300,000 a year, to meet the overall needs of our population. And I think that focusing these resources, if they can be generated, and I'm a bit sceptical about some of the numbers that are being put across here, though I haven't had time to study them in detail, putting that money into enabling one subset of the population to be able to own their own home, whilst failing to provide the houses that are needed more widely across the country, I think is just the wrong priority.
Were you against council tenants being able to buy their own home?
Well, the thing that we insisted on in the coalition was making sure that there was at least a one-for-one replacement, so that when a home was sold, another one was built. Well, the right to buy for council houses has existed for a long time.
Yeah.
It's very small numbers, so we're not seeking to reverse that at all.
Well, but a lot of people have bought. 2 million council house tenants, I think, more bought their own homes.
The point I'm making, Andrew, is I support the idea that people should be able to own their own home.
You just don't want to help people in housing associations.
But if you've got £5.4 billion to spend, and as I say, I'm not convinced by the numbers here, I think that there's a much better way to use that. And may I just make one wider point, which is...
Briefly, because I need to bring in Leanne Wood.
I think that the whole Tory manifesto is based on a con, because they're not setting out the cuts that they'd make. They're not setting out the welfare cuts that they'd make. So you've got secret cuts and unfunded policy commitments, throwing out these promises left, right and centre in a way that is utterly incredible, when in fact everybody knows that under the Conservatives, the people who pay the price are the working people who suffer these big cuts in welfare, the big cuts in departmental spending. You and I spent 8 minutes on Sunday talking about how the Lib Dems would balance the books. The gaping hole in David Cameron's presentation today was there was not a single detail on the cuts that the Tories would make, and indeed they want to go much further than the 30 billion that's necessary, and they don't set out a word on that at all.
Well, let me ask you this, since you've raised another question. Is the 12 billion in welfare cuts that the Tories are proposing, for you, is that a red line? Would you not join in coalition with a guy? If you say it's a con's quite a strong word. You wouldn't like to sit around the same table with con men and women. So would you join a government that wanted to go ahead with 12 billion in welfare cuts?
Well, look, I'm not going to get into the language of red lines or trying to pre-negotiate coalition.
Nick Clegg did yesterday.
No, he didn't. He didn't say that. He was asked about it, but those were not the words.
He would not be able to work with the Conservatives in coalition if they insisted on their proposed 12 billion in welfare cuts. What bit did I not understand about that?
The 12 billion, I do not think is deliverable. I agree with Nick Clegg about that.
He says he won't be able to work with them. That's saying I won't join with them.
We will not be party to delivering £12 billion of welfare cuts.
Which figure would you deliver then?
Well, we set out in our own manifesto exactly. So Andrew,
I remember the
from
interview,
Sunday,
but
3 billion.
Is it a red line?
What we're saying is £12 billion of welfare cuts is not something that we believe in. It's not something that we do.
I'm not arguing with that.
And Andrew, I'm sorry, I'm not going to get into to trying to pre-negotiate a coalition. What I'm saying is our priorities are to balance the books and do it fairly, to have a strong economy and a fair society. All you hear from the Tories again and again is they'll make these 12 billion of cuts. They will not spell out a single iota of where that money comes from.
So your opposition to welfare cuts of 12 billion could go the way of tuition fees when it comes to a coalition negotiation.
You'll hear more from us tomorrow about our manifesto, and balancing the books in a fair way is the top priority
All right.
in our manifesto. And you'll remember in 2010, the top priority in our manifesto was a £10,000 income tax personal allowance,
Okay.
something that we've delivered in government.
Leanne Woods, what's your are there many housing associations in Wales?
There are, and of course...
Is that the main form of social housing now?
Yes, it probably is. But
Should people be allowed to buy should they get a discount to buy their homes?
In Wales, we've taken a different approach to this question because we recognised a number of years ago that there had been a serious contraction in the number of social houses that were available for people. And so when Plaid Cymru was in coalition government with Labour in the Assembly, we were party to introducing legislation which enabled councils to restrict the right to buy in areas of great housing pressure.
So you would oppose the housing association extension?
Yes, I would. And I would agree that if there's an extra £5 billion to spend on housing, that there are much better ways to do that. We would like to introduce rent caps, for example.
If there is an extra £5 billion.
Well, that's another question as well,
No doubt
of course.
that will be gone over more as people absorb the manifesto. Danny Alexander, thank you for being with us. I'll see you in a couple of days' time again, just proving you can have too much of a good thing.
Well, before that happens, let's talk to Labour's shadow